It is the Doomsday Podcast, and you know us. I mean, I hope you love us. Ed Werder doing his thing today. He's been all over Twitter reacting as the Cowboys lose 41-7. And Ed, this was like whatever kind of feel good thing may have occurred over the last, I don't know, month or so. Like, oh my gosh, Cooper Rush, he wins on the road. They're winning games. They're playing better. Um, that all went away today as Saquon Barkley chased history. I had to laugh. Ed, I kind of thought, because now they're kind of set up. Oh, they play the Giants. How funny that will be against his original team as he goes for Dickerson's record. And my thought was, at the rate he was going, they should have let him go after this Cowboys defense like the fourth quarter and try to just finish the thing off.
The thing that struck me about it was the irony of when Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator now with the Eagles, was forced to leave Dallas because Mike McCarthy wanted to call his own plays and made the caustic remark that he wanted someone who doesn't just want to light up scoreboards. He wants someone who will run the damn ball and protect his defense, as if he was just the guy for that task. And Moore was totally incapable of it. And now Kellen Moore is on a team calling offensive plays for an Eagles team with the ninth 2,000-yard rusher in NFL history in Saquon Barkley, and an Eagles team that beats the Cowboys 41-17 to win the division, completes their first sweep of the Cowboys since 2011, and they set a franchise record for best point differential against Dallas in a single season, winning twice by a total of 62 points. 75-13. The previous record was 58 points set in 1961. I can't think of anything the Eagle fans would consider a more glorious day than being at home in a hat and T-shirt game, winning the division in their Kelly green jerseys and dominating the Cowboys by 34 points while Saquon moves ever closer to history.
Reality hits. Eagles, wrap up the division, and the streak continues. Ed, you're always good at remembering all this stuff, but however many now, 19 straight seasons of not having a repeat winner in the NFC East.
20 now, yeah.
20 now, yeah. So that's happened, and the Eagles take today. And again, I think we can talk. Ed, about Cooper Rush. I think what we'll do today is really get into Mike McCarthy. Does today's performance change the outlook for him? Does Jerry even have a plan without Mike McCarthy? Is there any way he could package bringing back Mike McCarthy that is sort of palatable to the fans? And right now it's hard to see that, but that may be what he attempts to do. We will hit all of those things. But first, Mike Hamilton of Rogue Media Network, please play the music. All right. And there it is, Ed, as the season reality has hit. No winning season. No thrilling finish. I mean, it wasn't going to be that thrilling, but with no CD, continuing to not have Dak, and just sort of just a ragtag group of receivers led by Brandon Cooks. I guess he's not ragtag. Rest of them seem to be. The Cowboys go out there and try to get it done. And quickly, Ed, you have a pick six in this game. Remarkably, the Cowboys answer. But, by the half, and then especially into the third quarter, this thing was over. Cowboys had one chance to kind of respond to start the third quarter, and they didn't get it done. They held the Eagles to a field goal, 27-17. So, Ed, I just think now we go back to all the questions. We can come back to Cooper Rush and all that, but nobody cares about that really. What everybody cares about is, okay, what's everybody's future? What do you do with Mike McCarthy in this staff? And so, Ed, I'll pose it to you, and I'll tell you what I think. But does a crash and burn 41-7 getting swept by the Eagles, Does that make any kind of impression on Jerry? Like, maybe it's a little bit harder sell to bring back Mike, or does one bad loss not really change the outlook of the situation?
Well, Jimmy Johnson on the Fox pregame show said, quote, regarding Mike McCarthy, I think he will be the Cowboys coach next year, and he deserves to be the Cowboys coach next year. To put it into context after what happened today, this will be Mike McCarthy's second losing season as head coach of the Cowboys and only his fifth in 18 years as an NFL head coach. In both of the seasons where he had losing records in Dallas, the Cowboys played the majority of their games without their starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, because of injury. Obviously, that happened in McCarthy's first season here in 2020 and again this year. I think the thing that this has to cause Jerry to do, and I guess maybe credit to Jerry for letting it all play out and not making a decision at any one point that might be an emotional reaction one way or the other. Like, letting it all play out is definitely the thing to do. And that's the process he seems to be following. I mean, the Cowboys are now 7-9. 4 of their losses have come by 25 or more points. Today's loss was the 11th worst in franchise history. Remember, when they lost by 38 at home to Detroit, that was the worst home loss in Jerry Jones's tenure. That was the 5th worst loss in franchise history. They've also lost by 28 at home to Philadelphia, by 25 at home to the Saints. And next week, Mike McCarthy goes against another one of his former coordinators in Dan Quinn. And he better hope that Dan Quinn doesn't run up the score on him, because Dan Quinn's the guy whose team won last week and clinched that the Cowboys would not have any chance to make the playoffs. They're mathematically eliminated. But the Cowboys have allowed 40 points 3 times in losses this year. So I think Jerry's got to take a step back and remember, this loss is so familiar to all those early season losses. Forget winning 4 times in 5 games against lesser opponents, with the exception maybe of Tampa Bay last week. I think the Cowboys I think the fact that Saquon Barkley's going for 2,000 yards or gets 2,000 yards in this before your back gets 1,000 yards gives you a sense of just how far apart these teams are, if you needed something beyond the score of the 2 games to remind you of that.
Oh, and by the way, it was shocking that Rico did make it to 1,000, given where he was just 5-6 games ago. It was like at that point, they're like, wait, we're going to make this guy our feature back, and we're going to hand him the ball a lot. I mean, that's the only reason this happened, right? There was one of the worst running teams in the NFL before that. And then now we're like, well, what do you do with Rico Dowdle? Do you decide him to a long-term contract? What do you do?
I saw the video of Kellen Moore interacting with Dak and Jerry before the game on the field, and it struck me. I wonder if Kellen Moore, in the back of his mind, will approach this as a job audition. Like the way he calls this game today, will he think that maybe that would get him an opportunity to be the head coach in Dallas if Jerry decides to make a move? I mean, to me, he makes the most sense of almost anybody out there. I think the number one guy, if Jerry decides to make a change, and maybe he's going to get pushed to the point where he has no real choice. But he created this situation very deliberately by not extending Mike McCarthy's contract in response to that awful playoff loss to the Packers last year. Has mentioned it several times when he's been asked about why he didn't extend McCarthy. But to not extend a coach who has won 36 games the previous 3 years and has won a Super Bowl in his career and almost never has a losing season with that, as long as he has a starting quarterback. I mean, Jerry wanted it to come to this. He wanted to make a choice about McCarthy. Maybe he thought in the back of his mind somehow this would produce a positive outcome, that this additional pressure on the coaches and the players would create the right response and they would win in a way that they haven't in a long time. But instead, here we are with this chaotic season. And remember, there's been a lot of injuries, and CeeDee Lamb being on IR now, where they got 6 former Pro Bowlers on IR. And that's certainly been the biggest factor. But remember last week when I asked Jerry, are injuries what you cite as being most responsible for the failure of the season? And he immediately said he took responsibility himself for what had happened this season. Now, whether he meant from a front office standpoint as far as player acquisition, in free agency, roster construction, or he meant I screwed up by putting McCarthy in this situation. I don't know. All of those things, I guess, could be applied here. But, I mean, I think Mike Vrabel would have to get some consideration. I think Kellen Moore would have to get some consideration, especially if, like, Moore's a better candidate to me if Mike Zimmer's willing to come back as a defensive coordinator, even if McCarthy's not the head coach. Like, if Jerry decides he wants Zimmer and pair him with a head coach, then Kellen Moore makes perfect sense. Certainly more sense than somebody like Mike Vrabel, who's going to run the defense himself. Mm-hmm. But I just guess we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what Jerry says next week after the game. I kind of felt like, all along, given how this thing is structured, that Jerry was going to have to communicate sometime between now and the Washington season finale next Sunday at AT&T Stadium. He's going to have to communicate to McCarthy what his intention is with McCarthy. Because if he doesn't do something with him contractually this week, if he doesn't make him an offer and he doesn't sign him, then he's going to lose his leverage, and he's going to allow him to be a free agent and have conversations directly with other teams that are going to have head coaching vacancies, whether that's the Jets, the Saints. We've talked about that McCarthy has a history with the Saints as a play caller. He has a history with Aaron Rodgers. If the Jets keep Rodgers and want to pair him with somebody he's been successful with as a head coach before, that could make some sense. So, I mean, it's not just going to be Jerry's decision at some point here. And even if he offers him a job, the extension this week, McCarthy could say no, depending on the structure and the value and the salary and all of that stuff.
Isn't it amazing, like, how people always have leverage over Jerry? This allegedly, like, incredible negotiator and businessman.
Every quarterback.
Dak got injured, and it gave him even more leverage over Jerry. And then Jerry has to pay him $60 billion a year, and he kind of comes out and doesn't play that well before getting hurt. And now, as you're pointing out, somehow McCarthy, after the playoff flop last year and then a losing season this year, has some sort of, leverage
potential
over
leverage.
Jerry. Yeah,
right.
Potential. And so I don't know if Jerry and Mike have had any, or with Mike's agent, have already had any sort of initial discussion. Mike indicated this week, and you were monitoring that, I know, kind of like, hey, I'm just keeping my head down, and we're going to control what we can control, and I'm not thinking about that. He admitted before the season, Ed, that it was uncomfortable. It was, he didn't try to, like, blow that away and go, I'm not going to think about that. He did at some point say, yes, this is very uncomfortable to go into a season on the final year of your contract. Most head coaches don't have that deal. And they got Dak's thing done. Ed, can you imagine, like, if they hadn't have done Dak and he had this injury and he's sitting there and he's on his way to free agency, and people have to kind of make a judgment about, okay, guy's been really good. I mean, he's hurt right now. What's he on the open market? With the Cowboys, I mean, like, knowing the Cowboys, they would, he might even make more money. he might have settled for too little at $60 million a year, but that it would be interesting if he hadn't have done that deal. And you have to wonder, he would never admit this, but you have to wonder a little bit right now, especially after the way the team started this year, if he was regretting that.
If that Dak was regretting signing with the Cowboys?
No. That Jerry was regretting signing Dak.
Yeah, well, you remember there was that, I guess, it was after Dak was out for the year and Jerry was making a post-game locker room assessment of where the team stood and whether, you would not hold McCarthy accountable because of the injury to Dak, which I mentioned has happened now twice in McCarthy's 5 years, bookended. His first year and his last year, what maybe his last year of this contract. And Jerry said, we only won 3 ball games with Dak. So, yeah, he seemed very displeased with everything, even when they had their starting quarterback. And now things have obviously gotten far worse in the absence of Dak Prescott. Maybe they could have made something out of, a poor start had they had their quarterback. But and this result today isn't really all that surprising to me in that, I mean, everybody credited Mike McCarthy with, oh my God, you got to keep him. Look at this team's fight for their head coach. They're playing hard for their head coach. Well, then what does that say about him today? Like, if he's going to get the benefit of the doubt and get credit for how they played last week and upsetting the Bucs and winning 4 out of 5 games when they were all but out of it, then what kind of blame does he have to assume today for not having the team play hard, not being competitive? I always thought, and I said this on TV last week, that this was going to be the more telling week about whether there was quit in this team. Because last week, yeah, they were mathematically eliminated, but they weren't mathematically eliminated until a few hours before the game kicked off. This was the week that was going to tell us, because this was the week with the holidays and all the family commitments and obligations. The players still had to go out and practice hard and practice and prepare to win, and that didn't happen, obviously. And so this was always going to be the more challenging week, in my estimation, of a team having to play with little or nothing to play for.
Yeah, and knowing that they had lost a guy that has kind of emerged as a leader and kind of a warrior that had played through injury. CeeDee Lamb wasn't going to go the last 2 games, and today they got, poor Andrew Booth. I don't know if he may have gotten played out of the league. Devontae Smith and the Eagles victimized him. He was in bad. And then Cooper Rush. I think you were kind of hinting, Ed, you were already kind of, I think in your opinion, leaning toward this guy. I'm not saying, I think you thought maybe people made too much of like what he's accomplished. I mean, he has won some road games and he has been serviceable for the Cowboys. And he actually has at times, including last week, put up good numbers. But boy, today was a reminder that, some mind-numbingly bad decisions. The pick six, the decisions at 3rd and short or 3rd and 5, whatever, the case may be, he kept going deep with the ball. Another interception where he threw into triple coverage. Who was he trying to throw to there? Was that
Brandon Cooks?
Was that Cooks? Yeah, you're right. That was Cooks. And so he's got 3 people around him, and that was just like, I don't even know. You can't even call that a jump ball. He just kind of threw that out. It wasn't even close to Cooks. So
and then Jake Ferguson lost a fumble. Rico Dowdle lost a fumble. Had 4 turnovers and 9 turnovers in 2 games against the Eagles. Cooper Rush has to recognize his own physical limitations, and I don't think he does all the time. He's incredibly careless with the football at times. We've seen it more this year than in previous seasons, probably because he doesn't have as much talent around him as he had in 2021 or 2020 when he was a starter for so many years. Maybe it was 2021, and so that's played out in the way that we have. Like, I just don't think you can be careless with the football if you're a backup quarterback. All the numbers will tell you if Cooper Rush turns the ball over even once, he's at serious risk of losing a game. Dak rides that small margin for error himself all the time. And in a backup quarterback situation, even more so. And, remember, he's 0-3 now against the Eagles. He's never beaten the Eagles. For all his success, he's 0-3 against the Eagles. And speaking of coordinators who know what they're doing against Dallas, as I did with the mention of Kellen Moore on offense, how about Vic Fangio on defense? Vic Fangio, remember, came in here as a Broncos head coach on Thanksgiving Day 4 years ago and said, hey, this is when the Cowboys were a great offensive team. And he said, hey, it's not that hard. I know the blueprint. And he shut him down. And then last year he was with Miami as a defensive coordinator, and he beat him. And now twice this year as Philadelphia's defensive coordinator, he's beaten him. So the Cowboys are up against it from a coaching standpoint when they're matched up against the Eagles, or so it seems. And Cooper Rush doesn't make it any easier for Mike McCarthy with his carelessness with the football.
Okay, now what I'm hearing you say is forget about Kellen Moore. Go get Fangio. I think we'd both admit Fangio may be better as a coordinator than he has shown to be.
I believe that's been proven,
yeah.
Yes, I think that's been proven.
I think he had a quick run there, and it ended fairly abruptly. Okay, it is time. We need to talk to him, and it is our resident Cowboys scout and former coach, Glenn Stretch Smith, with his stretch plays. It is time for Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys scout and coach. You hear him on WFAA or see him there on Channel 8, the ABC affiliate in Dallas-Fort Worth. And Stretch, this thing has come to a crashing halt. The chance at a winning season has gone out the door. And now the Cowboys will have the second losing season for Mike McCarthy in the past 5 seasons. Both of those include long stretches of Dak Prescott being out. And they lose 41-7. And this game, once it got away from them, it snowballed. And this became more about like a ceremonial watching Saquon Barkley put up huge numbers against this Cowboys defense. Let's start, Stretch, with something really well. We've been talking about the secondary all year, and, they were running Bland. They were keeping him with A.J. Brown. The problem with that is that, it leaves somebody over on Devontae Smith when you have 2 weapons like that, which obviously the Cowboys don't have on offense right now. And, Andrew Booth, who's probably not long for this roster or this team, got exposed in a bad way. What'd you think about just the overall effort of the secondary and the defense?
I mean, first half, this is a team that in Philadelphia that I think 5 minutes or at the 10-minute mark of the second quarter had only run 6 offensive snaps. I thought you saw Zimmer had a game plan to say, hey, we're not going to let Brown beat us. We're going to try to give Booth some over-the-top help. We know we're missing a Warrior. He was out, and so it was only a matter of time before I felt like Philadelphia was going to take advantage of that matchup. Now, having said that, Dallas controlled the football almost the entire first quarter, and other than a pick 6, they played pretty well. I'm talking about the Dallas defense played really well in the first half. It was just when you get to the second half and you get an offense that's not moving the football with you, that's not scoring for you, and then you combine that with arguably the best offensive line in the game in Philadelphia, the best offensive line coach in the game, and Jeff Stoutland, who is the Philadelphia offensive line coach, and they're leaning and hammering on you, then you got exposed. And they found the matchup that they wanted, which was Booth matched up on Smith. And, I mean, just before the half, he just runs a 9 route right by him. And so I don't know what you do if you're Mike Zimmer. You're just trying to piece together guys that you've got on the roster to go out there and try to get it done. He tried to run some blitzes, and he did. He ran some A-gap blitzes. He just wasn't able to get there. When you're not able to get there and you're playing let's be honest, a 4th-string cornerback, it's probably not going to have a good ending for you. And that's exactly what Philadelphia did, was they were able to expose the fact that Dallas was playing a down-the-line guy. And I mean, he gets beat by the 3rd-string corner late in the game. I mean, the 3rd-string quarterback late in the game. So I just think that, ultimately the war of attrition has caught the Cowboys, and it really bit them today in this situation.
All right. To your point, there were moments, whether it be Odigizua or Mozzie, who kind of came on this season and really improved. And so as bad as this game looked today, like you say, there were some decent performances out there. Overall, Stretch, I think before we talk about Cooper Rush and what was going on the offensive side of the ball, let me just bring this up with you. Mike McCarthy's job is going to continue to be talked about. The thought going into this game was that, and Jimmy Johnson even said on Fox, hey, I think he's coming back. I think he's going to go with McCarthy. And we've said, hey, he keeps them playing. He's got them playing hard. Do you feel like getting outclassed and beaten badly like this, 41-7, does this now make you think twice about McCarthy coming back, or do you not think this one game will have much impact on Jerry's decision?
Yeah, Matt. Here's how I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to answer it. I'm going to pose it a little different for you, because this is what I know, having been in the building in Dallas. number one, this started all the way back to last year with the first round loss to Green Bay. And we go into the offseason, and I know everybody in the Metroplex feels like they can play pin the tail on the donkey, and let's pin the tail on Jerry Jones for not doing anything of significance in the offseason. I can tell you that those coaches and that coaching staff had a say in how the offseason went, whether it was not signing Derrick Henry, whether it was not bringing another receiver in here, whether it was the lack of whatever they decided to do with free agency this year. So you combine all of what's happened in the last year into a package of saying, okay, then they went into the season. They lose Sam Williams right off the bat. They're really good defensive end. They lose Lawrence. We understand the war of attrition that happened at defensive end because then Nealon went down. They then, somebody told Jerry, you know what, we need to pay this quarterback. We need to pay Dak Prescott. Okay, he gave him that $60 million. And then the receiver got his money. And now we're into a position where you got a team that is decimated by injury, that goes out and plays very below average football for half of the season. Now, did Mike McCarthy keep them playing hard through a situation where there was probably not much to play for? He did. Did an offensive line with two rookies and Cooper Beatty and Tyler Guyton go out and function? They did. Then they lost Zach Martin. Then Hoffman comes in. I'm giving you a long answer here because I think there's more than just what has happened over this last 6-week window of what goes into whether you decide to bring back a head coach or not. I think Mike McCarthy is a good head football coach in the National Football League. And if you're going to move on from him, I think you better have a plan for what you're going to do. I believe as we sit here right now, I truly believe this, Jerry doesn't have any idea as to whether he's going to bring back Mike McCarthy or not, nor do I think Jerry has any idea as to whether Mike McCarthy might want to come back here or not. He may have other options at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Jerry, in some sense, if Jerry gives him a 3-year extension or does something to that effect, he's admitting, to your point, that maybe he did mess things up. And because Jerry has said, more than I've heard him say in a while, put this on me. This is a lot on me. And in doing that, in some way, that's setting up that's kind of setting up the ability to bring back McCarthy. Okay, one last thing. I mean, I think today what we saw was a reminder that while Cooper Rush has played well at times and has actually been a pretty good road quarterback, he's been awful against the Eagles. And just really, this season. And in fact, the first time I think he threw for 45 yards against them, threw the bad pick. I think we learned today. I think sometimes you've brought this up, Stretch. Hey, this is not a guy who really throws it downfield well. That's not what he does. And he tried to today, and it just wasn't there, right? It was like 3rd and short, and he was trying to hit guys deep, and he threw a couple of picks. He was wildly off on a couple of those throws. Like, I just think it was a reminder that while he's a serviceable backup, this guy is not a long-term starter really for anybody in this league.
Correct. Balls batted at the line of scrimmage, bad throws. I think Cooper Rush is a good NFL backup quarterback. I do. I think that's exactly what he is. He's in the position that he needs to be in. He can get you through a game. He doesn't have to take a lot of reps. He's a smart guy, understands the offense. But at the end of the day, there's a reason that the Raiders didn't sign him when they had an opportunity to sign him when he was a free agent. And that is, I don't believe he's a every Sunday, 17 weeks of the year NFL quarterback. And so you see that. You see it, especially when he faces arguably, the best defensive coordinator in the league, and Vic Fangio, who, obviously Doki him into that first pick six. It looked like he was playing, and they were playing man coverage, but they had a guy underneath spying the slant, and he runs right to it and picks it off. And so that you have to give that credit to the Philadelphia defense. But when you continually have batted balls at the line of scrimmage, not a great job of hitting the home run, which is throwing the deep ball and connecting with that, I think it shows when it can bite you, and it has done it twice. This year against the Eagles. That's the first time since 2011 the Eagles have beaten the Cowboys twice. And so it's I like Cooper Rush. This is not a situation where we're going to, bash Cooper Rush, nor we're going to bash Andrew Booth. They are backup guys that today got in position to get themselves exposed, and that's exactly what happened, Matt.
All right, Stretch, we'll do it one more time. And the Cowboys will finish up with the Commanders, and then in a very funny matchup, the Eagles will take on the Giants with a chance for Saquon to go for history against his former team. Stretch, appreciate it. Thank you very much, and always enjoy it, and we'll look forward to doing it one more time this season, reacting to next week's game. Thank you for Stretch Plays.
Appreciate it, buddy. Happy New Year to everybody.
There he goes, Glenn Stretch Smith with Stretch Plays. All right, there it was, Ed, and not as harsh as you might think. Off of 41-7, I think he saw some things in that first half he kind of liked. Saw some good effort out there. Thought the defense was playing okay. Of course, the second half, they just got sliced and diced by Saquon Barkley. After kind of holding him in check for a half, I think he had like 40 yards at the halftime, and then ends up, Ed, with somewhere around 160, 165 for the game. And they just kind of, basically ended up clowning on the Cowboys. And I couldn't help but think, Ed, when they showed that shot of Howie Roseman, I remember being in Howie Roseman's office in circa like 2000. I think the Cowboys had a really good year, hadn't they, in 2009, maybe? And then I'm trying to think what 2010 was, but somewhere right around then, like there was this thought that the Eagles were desperately trying to put a team together to match up with the Cowboys. The Cowboys, somewhere around them, they had a good year in 07, 08, 09. So they had some pretty good teams around then and some pretty good talent. And I just remember Howie Roseman, like literally on the board, he had the Cowboys too deep up, and he was trying to match. I mean, it was no other teams too deep. This was in the offseason. And he was desperately trying to catch up and pass the Cowboys. Well, since then, Ed, Chip Kelly basically put him in a cubicle. He was almost kind of bounced to the peripheral, and now he's back in the big seat and thought of as one of the best GMs in the league. And Ed, I think, we wish that Jerry could maybe bounce back. I mean, but that said, how long has it been since Jerry was voted the GM of the year? Wasn't it just a couple of seasons ago?
Well, he went in the Hall of Fame in 2017 for his executive prowess.
Yeah, but I think, and also, his impact on the game, but I think they actually gave him GM of the year a couple of years ago.
The Eagles and Howie Roseman took a completely different approach to free agency than obviously the Cowboys did. The Cowboys were the last team to sign a free agent. It was Eric Kendricks. They've been the last team to sign an unrestricted free agent, a veteran free agent, 3 of the last 4 years. So they have not been very active. And yet, Howie Roseman goes out and makes the trade, on draft night for A.J. Brown. He signs Saquon Barkley from a rival. And so they have not only improved their roster, but they did it at the expense of a division opponent in terms of the Giants, taking Saquon Barkley off the Giants. And, they obviously have saw and have contributed to this trend we're seeing in the NFL in terms of the emphasis on running the football now. Teams are running the football like they haven't in 20 years at a higher rate than they've done it in 20 years and more successful. And if you look at the NFC teams that are going to the playoffs, all of them are among the top running teams in football. And the Cowboys haven't been that. And that's not the approach they've taken. And that, to me, is one of the things that has to go into the decision Jerry Jones is making about Mike McCarthy and whether he wants him to be his coach. Is Mike McCarthy going to create with Dak Prescott and the limitations he's likely to have coming off a second major leg surgery and entering his age 32 season? Is he going to be able to create the kind of offense that complements what Dak Prescott can do? Because so far, McCarthy's shown us all he really wants to do is throw the football all the time. Mm-hmm. He's been very open about, wanting to play through the quarterback. He plays through the quarterback. He's had Brett Favre. He's had Aaron Rodgers. He's had Dak Prescott. He believes in throwing the football. He never really makes a commitment to run the ball. And we've seen the folly of it this year with bringing Ezekiel Elliott back, not drafting a running back, letting Tony Pollard go in free agency. Takes you half the season to realize who your best back is and commit to him. And even then doesn't get enough carries oftentimes. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big part of what Jerry has to decide. Like, how is Mike McCarthy going to structure this offense around Dak Prescott to win the kind of games they haven't won here in 30 years? And can he do it? Will he do it?
Yeah.
Even if he says he'll do it, will he do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At this point, why would you believe him? And again, why would you hand it to somebody like Dowdle, Ed, on 3rd and 1 when you can throw it to Mingo about 30 or 40 yards downfield?
Over the wrong shoulder.
I think they were blaming that on Mingo somehow. They were like, "Hey, I was supposed to look to the outside." It's like, okay, poor Mingo. We're going to put that on him. But, Cowboys lose this one 41-7. And I can't help but think, Ed, you're going to get and I'll mention Dak Prescott did talk to the media after the game and said that he's about not too far away from he said gained some strength in it, talking about the hamstring injury, started to use it a little bit, said, I'm probably a few weeks, maybe a month from running, but got on the bike, so definitely doing some things, moving more. So I don't know. And I guess Dak just kind of on his own decided, well, there's some, they want to visit with me. I'll talk to them. But it seems most times what he does is fairly calculated and smart. So I would think in the aftermath of a 41-7 loss, maybe he thought, maybe
deflect a little attention off the loss and the result of the coach and put a little on me for their benefit.
Maybe.
And the big decision that they have to make about whether Trey Lance or Cooper Rush starts the regular season finale next week.
I don't know if it's a big decision, but it's.
I'm being sarcastic.
I know. That's what made me laugh. He did get in with 2 minutes left, and I like what he did. I liked the way Trey operated in those last 2 minutes. Yeah, I thought he rolled out, just showed that speed. But I would rather watch Trey Lance throw 5 interceptions next week than Cooper Rush go out there and lose a tight ball game. Just let him go out there
or lose like he did today.
Yeah, just lose. Yeah, exactly. It's not that much different. Ed, get us caught up, though. The Eagles clinch the division. What are the Commanders? They're looking like the 7 seed. What is their level of interest in next week's game?
Hard to say. They play tonight, right, against the Falcons, and we've got Green Bay and Minnesota playing now. So, Green Bay's got one more win than Washington, so maybe Washington can catch Green Bay for the 6th seed. And that would be beneficial scheduling wise as far as where they would wind up playing or who their first round opponent would be. Okay. It appears anyway they're going to have to play one of those NFC North teams, and that's going to be a very difficult matchup. I guess the Rams would play the other one. They're going to be the team. Oh, well, I guess the NFC South team will have the worst record.
So
Everybody wants to go to Tampa or Atlanta this time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah. By the way, wasn't that funny today to see the Kenny Pickett like go to the locker room? He had that rib injury and he took a shot in the chest. It looked like from Micah Parsons. He goes to the locker room. He comes back and he's just like in a hoodie. He's just in street clothes, and then you look over there in the fourth quarter, and he's back in his pads.
The whole thing was weird. Remember, he tried to leave the field before the end of the first half, and all of a sudden, because of a penalty, they thought they might go for two. So Sirianni's calling him back out. He's halfway up the ramp. He comes back toward the field. They said, "Oh, never mind. We'll just kick it. We're not going to need 1 point. It's not going to be that big a deal against this Dallas team." So he went back in, and then like you said, it's like he's ruled out of the game. Then all of a sudden, he's back in uniform, and he's going to play again. What's the situation here? I guess they didn't have another quarterback. So if the rookie had to be out, had been hurt at some point and had to go out, then he would have had to go back in and at least take the snap. Tanner McKee, who by the way, in his NFL debut, throws 2 touchdown passes in 4 attempts?
Yeah, he looked pretty good. And was it A.J. Brown that threw the ball up in the stands?
Yeah. That was a great moment.
That guy, that's like the most important person in the Eagles organization. That
Big Dom. Big Dom. They got all over that. He rectified that situation.
Yeah. There's something about those teams in the Northeast. They have to have like the massive dude, like around their head coaches. Andy Reid always had somebody, and it may have been a young Dom, but there was an older dude that was hanging out with Andy, as I recall. And then I feel like Coughlin had some big, brawny kind of dudes around him. I don't feel like the Cowboys, they just kind of have
Abel Johnson.
He's not as burly as Big Dom.
You tell him. He's a former police officer. I'm sure he can handle his own.
Don't tell Cable.
He has to be able to handle the likes of me and you.
I don't know. I think I'm quicker than Cable in a lot of ways. All right, Ed, anything else going into this final game? It's going to be an interesting week because, as you said, will Jerry have to put something on the table for Mike McCarthy? Would it be like a 3-year deal if he does it, or will he roll the dice and let the season end? I would say right now, Ed, I'm trying to think what Jerry's thinking. I kind of think he's going to let it play out and not do anything before this game. And that creates the interesting situation, whereas Mike McCarthy could gain some leverage, and it would be the funniest outcome in the world for Mike McCarthy to immediately get hired by somebody else.
Leave of his own volition.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't totally.
It's not out of the realm of possibility that if he becomes a coaching free agent, somebody would offer him either more years, more control, or more money. He could be respected more elsewhere than he is here. Like, Jerry doesn't see the nuisance tax that he adds, right? In the same way that everybody else in the league does. Like when McCarthy goes out to interview and he says, "Hey, I won 12 games 3 years in a row. I won every year. I won big every year. I had my quarterback." And you know what that atmosphere must be like. Like, what could be more challenging than that? Than having to deal with an owner who's so public about all of his opinions.
Yeah. I'm thinking about all those openings. Saints, as you said, Jags, Bears. There's a lot of interesting.
McCarthy quite successful with quarterbacks and in the NFC, North. So could the Bears have an interest in him with Caleb Williams? Seems possible. He's sort of a guy who creates culture. That's important. Coaching quarterbacks, that's important. McCarthy does both of those things rather well, I think.
Yeah. And he may take Cooper Rush with him.
He might.
I think Cowboys would be okay with that.
I think Jerry'd like him to take the Trey Lance as well, if he wouldn't mind.
Who did Trey Lance? Who was the guy picked they could have had? Was it what was that guy's name? That running back, the 4th round running back from last week.
Oh, the one, Irving, Bucky Irving.
Oh, I love that guy.
He went over 1,000 yards today as well.
I heard. Yeah, Bucky Irving, man, rookie.
Not to be outdone by Rico Dowdle.
Rico, this may be a one and done thing, but Rico had his time in the sun this season. So give him credit, and also give Jalen Tolbert credit for playing through apparently like a fractured finger or something like that.
Touchdown 3 weeks in a row for a guy who had sort of been seen as an underachiever this year.
Kind of finished the year strong, so we'll see what that means. and they continue to try to work the ball down the field to Mingo, get the great Mingo involved. Ed, tremendous work. Appreciate you. We'll both be on the scene next week. Ed, do we have a game time on that?
No, it's not been determined yet. It's one of those, final week of the season. They've got to determine who plays, what time slots, try to match up the team. So they don't know whether they have to win or they don't have to win, or winning significant or not, so that they all play hard. And that's going to be a challenge, I think, under the circumstances.
I tell you what, let's tape it at 3 next week, no matter when they play, even if they play.
Even if they play at 3:30?
That's right. Let's just go ahead and knock it out. Ed, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to our audience. And I did want to say, Blake Marable, Marable.com, thank you so much. In fact, this coming week, we'll celebrate some this week with New Year's, and the Doomsday will take a couple of days away, and then we will be shooting a new commercial, and it's going to be beautiful. MarableHomes.com, luxury homes that are done the right way, and they are gorgeous. Lake Highlands, Preston Hollow, Highland Park. I think if Jerry decides to build again, does kind of a tear down situation, he will come to Marable Homes. Great people and great relationship they've had.
He's got something else he needs to decide whether he's going to tear down or not first.
That's right. He has a tear down on his hands with this organization, in fact. But thank you, Ed. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you all. Thanks for listening and watching. We appreciate y'all.
All right. For Mike Hamilton from Rogue Media Network, who we always thank and does a great job, and Ed Werder and Glenn Stretch Smith, I am Matt Mosley. It is Doomsday. Good night, everybody.
We are Rogue Media Sports.